I want to welcome you today to today's AICC's COVID call. I don't know what number we are, 13 or 14, but it's an exciting day today. I'm Taryn Pyle, and I'll be hosting the call today. By hosting, I mean I'll be taking all your questions and helping the facilitator weed through them. But Steve will be hosting today in lieu of Mike not being available. We have a few housekeeping details before we get started. Just as a reminder, the call today will be 60 minutes long, and a link to the recording will be posted on our website where all the COVID calls have been posted, and you can download it from there. In the event we go over the time allotted, any other questions can be sent via email, and AICC staff or the presenter will follow up individually. I'm going to just give you a reminder about the box at the bottom. If you scroll down, you'll see that there's an option. Scroll down with your mouse, a tab will pop up, and you'll see the option to mute or unmute your microphone. Start your video if you want to let us see your face. If you go further down, you can see the participants icon. If you double click on that and open it, at the bottom there's the opportunity to raise your hand and lower your hand. A little bit further down is the chat feature. You can click on that, open it up, and post questions there, and we can read them out loud. If you raise your hand, we will call on you. So there's that. If you get a dial tone or are disconnected from the site, that means that it's a problem on your end, so you'll need to call back in for that. As we begin, please remember AICC is an international trade association, and as such, members are bound to uphold the letter and spirit of all applicable competition and antitrust laws, including those of the U.S. and Canada. During this meeting, there will be no discussion allowed concerning prices, customer or market allocations, specific accounts, discounts, terms, and all other matters prohibited by law. If this were to happen, we would have to stop the call immediately if there's any violation of the antitrust laws. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Steve Young. Steve?
Thank you, Taryn. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Taryn, you said this is the 13th or 14th. By my count, I think it's 15 of our COVID calls, which actually began back in March. And while we were doing an every week rotation early on, we've gone to an every other week now for the last, I guess, couple of months. And each one has focused on a particular aspect of what's been going on during the COVID crisis, if you will. I want to encourage you to continue to check AICC's website for updates on the COVID situation. We're not posting them daily anymore, but rather we have weekly posts. So I encourage you to go there and see the latest. I know OSHA has recently revised some guidelines for workplace settings, and there was also further information on extension of the PPP benefits also on this week's update. So please check there. Today, the focus is going to be on how do we increase sales using the data already at your disposal in your company. How do you increase sales, especially during this pandemic? And we're very pleased today to have Mark Roberts with us. I listened to Mark and Ed Wallace on a call on Wednesday, and I was very impressed with the analytic approach that they're taking to sales management, and also in coaching salespeople. And so today we're going to be focusing on using the data at your fingertips that you have within your company, the data sets that you can use to increase your sales even during a pandemic. So Mark Roberts is our speaker today, and I want to introduce you, Mark. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Steve. And thanks everybody for attending. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
And really when Taryn reached out, she was saying, look, what advice could you give our members? Because we were all kind of hoping that COVID was going to go away, and now we're seeing it spiking again. And what can we do? And what I try to do when people are getting emotional and fearful, anxious, is go to data. So what I wanted to do today was just share some insights to help people get through COVID and actually come out stronger on the other side. So how do we convert data into actionable information. That's what we're going to be spending some time on today. And what I'd like to do, just to get the conversation started, because I'm here to serve you. You know, I've been helping sales teams for this is the 36th year. And one of the things Taryn thought was, you know, if you guys have very specific questions that you're struggling with, but one of my questions was, you know, how many of you have like pivoted and already started to create a plan for the rest of 2020?
If you can post in the chat feature and let us know if you have started to develop a plan.
And obviously, if you ever have any questions throughout this, Taryn will see them and we'll answer them as we go.
We've got one person saying, nope, don't have a plan. One says we have. So you got a 50-50 here.
Well, that's not unusual. The couple clients that I have on a regular basis, I mean, where we've been spending a lot of our time is on the business instead of in the business. You know, how do we navigate through what we're learning today? So if we had to ask the question a different way, for the people on the call, what would you say is your biggest challenge today for your business?
There's a couple comments here. We certainly have made some adjustments to our plan.
Yeah.
Somebody said kind of. They're starting to roll something out now. Biggest challenge, I don't have anybody posted yet, but please go ahead and post your comment. You know, it's kind of interesting, Mark, because when we were on the call on Wednesday, one of the biggest challenges for salespeople in particular was this concern over not being able to get into the plant, not being able to get into a customer's plant. They just
That was the most popular concern, and actually after the call, more people from the association connected to me on LinkedIn and started sharing specific scenarios. The only way you're going to connect with some new prospect today is virtually right now, is what I'm seeing. So we might as well plan for that.
We have somebody saying lack of industry meetings is one of their big problems. Market segments served, demand reduction.
Right.
Uncertainty of economy and willingness of customers to commit to capital projects. Cash is king in times of downturns. Getting older, experienced customers to pivot to new technologies.
Yep, that makes sense.
Good
Sometimes
answers.
it's hard to get older, experienced salespeople to pivot to new technologies.
This kind of goes up against the comment you had not up against, but is in line with the comment you had on Wednesday's call about how your customers' needs are changing, and are you aware of your customers' needs changing?
And have you adjusted your value proposition based on the needs? One of the clients that I help, you know, I actually sit in on calls every once in a while to coach. And what I kept hearing was things that probably made a lot of sense about probably a year ago, but no way. What you just said was, with cash being king, people do not want a whole bunch of inventory now. So you need to adjust your value proposition based on the needs that, you know, that your customers share. And then the other question that I, you know, ask teams is, you know, do you have the right people with the right skills in the right roles? I think I shared with Taryn, one of the things I do is I do voice of the customer research. And I recently did it for a company in the HVAC, you know, a heating and air conditioning business. And it really, I expected the number to be high, but not this high. Over 60% of their customers now prefer virtual. So if that's the case, this particular person has 60 outside salespeople. So the CEO and I were talking, and it's like, wow, if this data is true, we're going to have to restructure, retool, really rethink how we go to market. So again, there's a lot of different data out there if we want to look for it, and it'll help us reshape. And the most important data is, what do your customers want and expect today? And the people who pivot into that are going to come out of this a lot stronger than the people who continue to sell like they've always sold. Is there any other questions or comments coming through?
Not at this time.
If you were some of the people that said, you know, I just don't know. You're not alone. The statistic was, and I don't know why this slide got cut short, but only 16% of sales leaders report that they have the talent that they believe they need, and the people on their team have the skills required for them to hit their sales plan. That's a pretty disturbing number. I mean, that means the vast majority of the people on the team either need training, need coaching. Steve and I were talking before the webinar started, and you know, the statistic is about 50% of salespeople have never had sales skills training. We've all had product training. If you've just joined a company, you were probably onboarded on how to use their systems, maybe their ERP system, maybe a CRM if they have one. But for whatever reason, we really don't spend a lot of time on sales skills. So preparing for this, you know, Taryn said, you know, why don't you help our community by answering a couple of questions, like how do we plan during a pandemic? What do we do in a market with so much uncertainty? How do we adapt, and how do we use this time effectively to not only survive but thrive? So that's how we're going to spend our time together. But if somebody has a question that I can help you with today, and hopefully you can apply, please use the chat box. When I hear questions like that, I like to draw analogies, and what I'm thinking is, wouldn't it be cool if you could take your business and put it through an MRI? You know, if you've ever had an MRI, it's a pretty, you know, extensive test, but very quickly they can look and diagnose, you know, maybe you had a symptom, you know, maybe you've had a headache, and for whatever reason, you know, the headache's been around for a while, you've tried different things to make it go away, you have an MRI, and then you find out really what's causing the headache, the root cause. And that's kind of what data can help you do. When you leverage data, you're not really looking at intuition or your market knowledge from doing this for 30 years. What you're looking for are root causes, and the data will speak to you if you know what to look for and where to look. So over the years, what I've developed is what I call the no smoke and mirrors process. That's actually the title of my next book, is called No Smoke and Mirrors, 10 Biblical Steps to Grow Your Company Profitably. And those processes are, you always start with, you know, evaluate your current sales force. You know, what skills do they have? Like, for example, when I work with sales teams, like the one yesterday, typically they're really good at presentation skills. You know, they're really good sometimes at not having a fear of rejection just because they've been in sales for a long time. But sometimes they struggle, most teams struggle with qualifying and closing. So what you do is you run a diagnostic and find out where are they strong, where are they weak. Then I ask your buyers. Some of my customers want me to just ask their top 7 customers, which you can do. Or they say, look, I'd like you to call at least 400 of them if it's a really big company. My only advice when you do that is don't have the salesperson who calls on the account do it, because it's very difficult not to be biased when you ask a question and, you know, somebody gives an answer. The other challenge is if the buyer has a relationship with that salesperson, it might skew how they answer it. So typically what we'll do is, if your team has marketing people, they're great to do this questions. You know, sometimes people hire an outside agency to do it because we can do it very quick while your team is really busy right now. But again, you really want to capture, you know, what your buyers are living, what's their life like, any changes that have occurred, and adapt. And then again, you know, evaluate your sales force, but this time more from like your effectiveness, your practices, your process. Does your process match how buyers are buying today? Do they have the right tools based on the criteria buyers need today? I also look at other data. You know, I look at the effectiveness, but I also run a report on net profit by customer. Chances are everybody on the call can run a report of revenue by salesperson or revenue by customer. But what you need to do is take a hard look at the cost of sale. And we're going to talk about that in a couple slides, because the cost of sale is a really critical thing to understand that drives the net profit by customer. And if we're looking at limited resources, we're looking at focusing our team's efforts, we really want to understand the net profit by customer to either correct underperforming customers or reduce the call pattern on those customers and guide them to more of a digital solution. And then once you have all the data, then you can sit down, because your management team, has been around, they're experienced, and if they have good data, I feel very confident your team's going to be able to create a plan to take you through now, but also into the future. So when I say your current sales force, what we look at is sales leaders, competency by role, the whole sales team. Like, for example, the one I did yesterday, we really need to do training on qualifying, closing, and negotiating if they really want to make a big impact quickly. There were other things that were ranked, but not nearly as big an impact on their bottom line. And then you also want to look at each salesperson, and that's where I'm a big fan of like individualized learning plans, if you can do that. If you can't do that, at least, as the sales manager, you can understand and get insights into your people by understanding, where are they strong, where are they struggling. But the new thing is now virtual skills. And then also managers are struggling, managers that were really effective face-to-face with their teams or in the building with their teams. There's been a number of Harvard articles and McKinsey. Managers are starting to struggle with this whole virtual environment. How do we, get the behavior and the performance we want, but virtually? And that's something that managers are going to need training on now. When you're looking for your buyers, if you choose to reach out to some of your accounts, we recommend that you do, how are your buyers buying? What are they buying? Typically, when we ask that question, it's really interesting that, we'll get a list of things and we'll ask them, why aren't you buying that from, whatever customer hired us? And they weren't even aware that you had it. So sometimes, that increasing your share of wallet, upselling and cross-selling, that might be an outcome from the voice of the customer research. What new challenges are you facing? One of the companies that I help in the building industry sent all their salespeople home, assuming everybody had a computer. A lot of those folks didn't. So what we had to do was they had to go out and get a bunch of computers. They had a lot of training on Zoom, but they had to adjust to the new normal. What processes are your buyers using to buy today? What's important to them? What's the criteria? Again, with working with one client, their buyer no longer has the ability to make a purchase over X amount without a CEO signature right now, because cash is king. That's something new. So if you're counting on your buyer to have the ability to sell your business case internally, that's going to be a real struggle. So what we did for that person, that client of mine, is we created like 4 slides that the buyer can share with the CEO on why they should approve the purchase and the impact that it can have on the bottom line. The other thing we're seeing is quite a few value propositions. Either the salespeople don't know them or they're dated. So what that does is it actually shows your buyers that you really don't understand the market. If you're out asking and pitching solutions that really don't resonate with what they're going through today. And then the other thing we always get is a net promoter score. What that does is it helps you understand like who are raving fans, who are buying from you. They're okay, but they're not a fan, but they're also not a deterrent. And then who are really like unhappy and are about to defect. Because once we give you that list, you can give them a little bit of TLC. Hopefully none of them are your large accounts. But if they're about to defect, the time to save them is before they leave. So again, just speaking with your buyers, taking the time to reach out to them. If anybody wants like more coaching on that, I actually wrote an article where I shared some of the questions I used when I used to do this face-to-face back in the day. But now with technology, you know, the firm that I use, you know, they have a clinical psychologist write the questions. They have 35 people, you know, that can crush through a list pretty quickly. And this is all they've ever done. So they can get people talking. But again, if you want to do this, my only advice is it's very difficult if you give this to the salesperson because you might have a little bit of bias in the answers. And then when I talk about effectiveness, what I'm looking at here is, you know, sales process. Does it match what the buyers just told you on your phone calls? What is your sales onboarding and training program, and how could it get better? How are you going to do that virtually? When I was a training manager at Timken Corporation, I would get the recent graduates right out of college with mechanical engineering degrees, and they would live in Canton, Ohio for 6 months, and I trained them every day for 6 months. How are you going to manage online and onboarding, and how, you know, so all those things need to be thought about. What new sales tools are you going to need? If you're not face-to-face with a buyer today, maybe there's some new tools that you need to have. And definitely, again, a new value proposition that resonates with each of your buyer personas. On one of the calls, I asked the question, you know, who are some of the people you deal with? And I think the answers were engineers, industrial engineers, purchasing, quality. Well, each one of those people have something that's important to them that might be worded a little bit different than the other people. So what you really need to do is equip your salespeople with value propositions based on the people that influence as well as make the decisions today. Elevator pitches, if you're doing a lot of prospecting, make sure the elevator pitch resonates with what people are dealing with today. For example, if I'm buying packaging today, what I'm probably looking at is more of a just-in-time inventory model. I want somebody local so that if I guessed wrong, I can get it the next day. And then also any limiting beliefs. That's one of the biggest challenges I see with salespeople today. And they were actually on one of our calls with Ed and I. Somebody asked the question, is it okay to start selling again? Absolutely. But it's how you do it that's a little bit different. And then one of the things you need to make sure of is, do your salespeople understand your expectations today for them, your vision for what they should be doing, what behaviors are you looking at? That's all about communication, and it's really hard to do when everything's so virtual. So, you know, I'm recommending that you make a really concerted effort in over-communicating expectations. And I'm talking like the one team I'm working with, you know, I expect you to talk to 5 current customers a day and 3 new ones. And I expect you to enter it into the CRM. And if for whatever reason you can't do that, you know, let's meet, talk about it, and let's get through it. But we really need to double down on our current customers. So it's, you know, that kind of clarity so that everybody understands what's expected and how we're going to win. And then net profit by customer, I don't know if that's something that's popular in this industry, but what it does is when you add the cost of sale into your profit by customer, it's a pretty enlightening document. And what it quickly does is about 20% of your current customers represent 300% of your profit. So that wasn't an oops on Mark's part. This is where the most ideal customers are delivering the maximum value to your bottom line. So if that's true, what happened? Well, about 60% of your customers are break even when you add in the cost of sale. When I say cost of sale, what are things in the cost of sale? Freight, terms, inventory, rep commissions, anything else that you might uniquely do to serve that customer. Quite a few of my distributors in another industry, they go out and do inventory twice a week. Well, that's a cost. It's cost in mileage, it's cost in time. But then what you also want to do is figure out what accounts are profit leaking. So when we do this report, it's kind of spooky, but about 20% of your customers are leaking profits. In other words, every time you ship them, every time you serve them, you lose money. And there's about 5 ways to correct that. And there's, I can have another webinar on that. But if you really want to create a lift in your contribution to your bottom line, I have a lot of my clients working right now on correcting those profit leaking customers. One way is, increase your share of wallet, sell some other things, and have a higher blended margin. One way is maybe they should be in a more of an e-commerce digital service and not even have a rep calling on them. Maybe we call on them once a quarter instead of once a month. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do to adapt, but this is a pretty powerful document, because if you're looking at how do I structure sales, how often should we call customers, how much time should we give customers? Hey, Mark, I've got limited resources. A couple of my vendors are really letting me down. I don't have a lot of inventory. Well, I mean, I would use this report and take really good care of the people that are contributing the most profit. And it's okay to lose a few of the people that are profit leaking accounts. So again, that's just another data point. You can run that yourself. If somebody in your firm is really talented with Excel. But my only caution is, if you do it, don't do it for every single cost. My recommendation is pick the 7 levers of cost, 8 levers that are most prominent for your business, because you could get all caught up in the numbers like an activity-based costing system, and the report itself becomes more complicated than the benefits. And then once you've gathered those 3 data points, you've looked at the skills of your team, you've looked at how effective your processes are in sales, you've looked at what the market is saying and wanting, and then you know the net profit by customer. Now you can create a formal sales process. Once the process is developed, it's a best practice to train the managers first, provide sales managers coaching tools, because people are going to want to gravitate towards the way they used to sell, and then train the team, and then implement if you have a CRM. How many people have CRMs? Maybe just type into chat, yes, Y if you have one, or N if you don't. I'm just curious how important a CRM is in this industry.
Got 1 yes so far.
Well,
No.
while people are answering, just like we've seen a huge full court press on digital and digital engagement, on digital marketing, e-commerce, we're also seeing a huge push for CRMs, because there's nothing as powerful as a CRM if you're trying to manage and coach somebody remotely. What were some of the answers?
Mostly yes, 1 no.
Excellent, because again, some of the industries I serve, they've yet to embrace CRM. And I really don't know how you would manage a sales force remotely without CRM today. So that's awesome that your association is already doing it. And then what are some market leaders doing? I went out and did some research to prepare for our call. Number 1, always focus on safety, focus on retention. Retention of your employees consistently. Anytime there's been a market disruption, the people that found ways to keep their people employed are the ones that bounced bigger when it was over. But also account retention. A lot of these webinars, everybody's like talking to me about prospecting. Don't talk to me about prospecting till you've reached out to every one of your current customers, because the most expensive thing to do in sales is to bring on a new customer. The most profitable thing to do is retain and grow existing customers. They're redeploying their workforce. In sales, we're seeing a lot of people getting into an inside sales model, and probably going to stay there based on, like what Taryn had shared as far as like a hybrid model. They're pivoting their production based on what people are buying compared to what they've always made. They're working on operational efficiencies to help reduce their costs. We're also seeing new business models emerge. They're focusing on productivity both in manufacturing, but also in sales for the first time. Really looking at that ROI of each expense, each call in sales. And then we're reskilling talent. As we ask people to get into new roles, like the HVAC distributor I was talking about earlier, there's people in sales roles not right now that used to be in the role of branch manager. So they need to be reskilled and prepared for the role and have the competencies to be successful in that role. And what should we expect in the future? There was a McKinsey article that came out this week, and it said you should expect flattened organizations, there's a typo, structures for speed, faster information. Speed is king right now. Customers expect quick answers, much more digital transactions and marketing, increased focus on the customer. Again, understanding the customer gives you an unfair advantage over your competitors. And then much more stronger performance orientation. Again, with cash being king, what we choose to do needs to drive results. So question for you, in the last 30 days, how many sales do you think, what % were virtual? Just put it into the chat.
I already know the answer because it was on Wednesday's call.
Mark, do you mean it within our industry?
Yeah, well, no, just for your team or what, you know, overall, just within your industry, all industries, you know, up to 2019, about 45% of sales were done virtually. What do you think it is now?
Got 100%.
Yeah, the McKinsey article said it's 90% and growing. We expected it to go to 60%. I think it was by 2029, but because of the disruption that we're seeing, all it did was it accelerated what people had already planned to do, if that makes sense. So if that's true, you know, what are we doing to get people ready for that new normal? Here's another thing about virtual sales. The tool that I use has surveyed over 2 million people globally in the last 30 years. And lately what we've been looking at is what skill sets do people have for outside people to be able to move inside? And what we found was a disturbing number. 59% of outside salespeople struggle with virtual sales without training and coaching. So if all we did was hand them a laptop and gave them a Zoom training, they're probably struggling, they're probably frustrated. A lot of the things they used to do aren't working right now. And that develops what we call reluctance. You know, after you've made 15 calls and not one of them ended well, you're not really that anxious to make another call, unless you're wired like me, because I'm always looking for the next sale. Buyers are starting to prefer virtual sales. It's a new model. It has its own advantages, but it also has disadvantages. Buyers are starting to share new expectations for outside sales. In the surveys that I'm doing, the voice of customer work, if you make your own phone calls, what you might hear is, what I really want is not necessarily a salesperson calling on me, but a technical expert, somebody that really understands applications, products, and can help me and help my customers. And then also the big one that we've kind of, I don't want to say overdone, but what consistently comes out is buyers want a trusted advisor. They don't want reps. If all the salesperson's job is in your team is transactional, other words, you know, hey, I see you need, 16 more widgets. Hey, thank you for the order. It'll ship on Friday. A lot of that kind of stuff can be done with technology today. So buyers are doing whatever is the fastest thing for them. But what they really are hungry for, and we discussed it on our call Wednesday, I think the fellow's name was Jonathan. He's a technical expert. He's able to give his customers insights on problems that he solved for other people just like them or others in their industry. They're hungry for that. Any kind of insight to help them be more efficient and more effective. When it comes to inside sales, virtual sales, building virtual relationships is number one. And if your team is looking for a book to read, Ed Wallace's book is a bestseller on building strategic business relationships. Active listening. I've been in sales for 36 years, and there's two things that buyers have complained on for 36 years. Number one, my salesperson doesn't listen. And number two, the salesperson doesn't understand the business of my business. That can both be cured with active listening training and business acumen training. Qualifying, empathy, virtual presentation skills, the discipline of working remotely, and then build trust early and throughout the buying process. That's actually something that can be trained and followed. I'm a big fan of building trust into the sales process itself. So again, just keep this in mind. If we're going to be stuck with virtual for some time, and maybe 40, 50% of your customers are going to prefer it moving forward, we really need to give the people handling those accounts the skills they need to be successful. Often when I talk to CEOs and presidents, they struggle with, well, what's the ROI? Talk to me about the ROI of improving sales skills. On average, top performers sell at about 10 points greater gross margin than bottom performers. They have 2 times greater account retention and about 6 times greater share of wallet. So take a look at your top performers, and you can, every time I'm on a call and I talk to a CEO, I'm like, what's the name of your 2 top performers? And without missing a beat, they say, oh, that's Mike and Bart. Okay, interesting. You knew that right off the top of your head. Talk to me. What do you like about their results? Well, I mean, they keep bringing me more new business. The business that I get is more profitable. Their current accounts, they do a great job of selling everything they have in their bag. Okay, well, talk to me about your bottom 30%. And this is a call I just had with somebody in the medical supply industry. And he said, yeah, about 30% of the people on my team right now probably shouldn't be in sales, but because we're so busy, we don't have time to deal with it. Well, for those of us who have time to deal with it, now's the time. Because again, it's a pretty big impact to your bottom line when we upskill salespeople. What do you guys think is the greatest sales challenge salespeople are facing today? Maybe put it into the chat.
There was a lot of answers on the call on Wednesday.
Do you remember what some of them said?
Yeah, I think the biggest one right now is that fear of virtual. That there's just this fear of, how do I get people engaged? And there was one member was saying that, he can't, that his customers don't want to be on virtual either. And so how do you break that, that habit, so to speak? Somebody wrote communicating their value proposition. I think we found by asking the question on the call on several of the virtual selling skills calls, a lot of people don't even really know how to communicate their value proposition. So I think that's a really good one. Also, trying to figure out how to connect in a deep enough way to be effective. John, do you want to speak more to that?
Unmute.
Yep.
All righty. Yeah, I think that, we're so used to going out and calling on people and, getting samples and chatting with them and see what's going on in the office and what their issues are in their business and all those different things that you are able to get on a personal call. It's kind of denied to us now, a little bit. So what we're trying to figure out is, how do we still get some of that information? How do we get a customer on the phone for more than 10 minutes? How can we communicate, electronically with them so that we stay in touch? There's a lot of transactional business going on for us back and forth, over the wires, I should say. But we're not getting any of the soft stuff, if you know what I mean, the more important long-term things, the stuff that builds relationships and generates trust and that kind of thing.
Yeah, what I miss is just going into a plant and walking around. I can't tell you how much new business I pick up.
Oh, absolutely.
What's all that stuff over there?
Yeah.
In that cage? Oh, that's all our quality defects.
That's right. Why?
I says, those aren't my parts, are they? Oh, no. Those are those parts we get from India. We get about 20% of them. They're defective, but it's such a good price. I'm like, whoa. 20% are defective. Let's do the math here. I mean, I'm a sales guy, but I can figure out that if you're getting 20% defective and you have to spend time sorting them, my product is actually cheaper. I mean, that gives me a lot of power, but those are the kind of things I miss. And what I'm finding is we have to get really good at asking really good open-ended questions and doing discovery like never before now. What we used to be able to see with our eyes, we now have to ask.
Yeah.
Were there any other comments on what they thought their biggest challenge was?
Greg, do you want to speak to what you wrote? You're on mute.
I forgot what I wrote. What did I write?
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg Jones.
Oh,
Sorry. Do you want to talk though, Greg, while I got you on?
really, yeah, I think we're hitting on all the key deals that our salespeople are struggling with it. And I think what you just hit on is asking questions open-ended is really what you need, because we no longer have body language. We have eyeballs, right? And now sometimes we're doing conversations with masks on, even because some folks are half in a plant, half in an office. So all we have is eyeballs, a little bit of mouth, but there's no arms, there's no legs, there's nothing. And we have to get that facial expression and that's all we got. So we have to get everyone's remarks is prudent to really getting information now. But there is no, hey, what's Johnny doing? What's happening here? As we're bouncing in and out of these Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, there's no time in between these meetings as well. I mean,
Right.
people are working so effectively and so fast that there's no time for chit chat. It's great. It really is great for effectiveness and getting things done. But as far as personal relationships, those are kind of wandering and squandering, and we're no longer seeing those things anymore. It's the demise of what the new now is, you know, kind of a bummer, but you got to get good at listening. We've got to clear our ears out, shut our spitter, ask a couple questions and let it rip and see what happens.
Interesting thing, Greg, when we did a virtual selling skills course with Ed Wallace and Mark, and we asked some of the salespeople to post some of their open-ended questions, and they really weren't open-ended questions. So I think one of the best ways to start at getting your people to understand open-ended questions is to help them understand how to write them, or have them create some in their wheelhouse, so that they just understand what an open-ended question actually is. But we found that a lot of people just immediately went into a question that gave a yes/no answer, and then they weren't able to expand farther into the conversation.
Or even worse, they start pitching without asking.
Yep.
And that has a really low effectiveness. But really, one of the biggest challenges I'm seeing right now is mindset. I hear people saying buyers aren't buying, salespeople, shouldn't contact them now. It's wrong to call somebody in a pandemic. We've also had social unrest. So it's like, wow, what do you mean? I shouldn't call my customers with riots going on.
Great.
What we need to do is reframe those beliefs, because if you believe that, you're not going to pick up the call and pick up the phone and do what your company needs you to do. And those
a lot of this is coming back to, one, did we hire the salesperson correctly in the first place?
Yep.
And did we give this person training? And did we give their mentor, coaches, boss, whoever else training to help them lead? Those are the three things that all of that, now that the water has moved out, those rocks are sitting on the beach, and boy, are they, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we got to do right now is reevaluate, reestablish, train. And you got the time. You do have the time. Ask a salesperson what they're doing tomorrow.
Yep.
That's always the greatest question. Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? I got to meet with you. Oh, I got tons of time.
Yeah.
Well, and what's nice is, again, the theme of this chat is data. I mean, there are some incredible pre-hire sales specific assessments you can do. There's tools like CRM, where if I was coaching a sales force right now, the first thing I would do every morning is look at the CRM, find out where they're getting stuck, what's their activity level, are they doing the behaviors I told them I wanted and expected, or what's going on. I mean, it's a whole different kind of management. And also, like you identified, a lot of times we hire people that really are good at interviewing, but they didn't have the will to sell. So make sure whatever tool you use, not only looks at skill, but looks at their motivation and their beliefs. When I work with teams, everybody's telling me doom and gloom, and quite frankly, some industries are really scary, right? I mean, if you're serving, United Airlines, you're going to have a really difficult time. But if you look at the data, and again, that's where I wanted to have a data-driven conversation, 50% of buyers said that their purchasing has decreased 4 to 25%. 22% said buying is at the same rate, and 28% actually said it's 4 to 25% up. So what I would do is take a look at your data. What products are you selling that are up? And start calling those people and finding out what's going on. One of the clients that I work with makes parts that are used in handguns. And all of a sudden, this part was like going through the roof, and they're like, what's going on? I says, let's call them. Well, why? I mean, I'm just thrilled to get the order. I said, yeah, but what if we could get more? And it turns out that this particular handgun manufacturer is 190,000 9mm handguns behind. And then we just started asking a lot of questions. Why? What's going on? And, we found out, and then we started approaching other handgun manufacturers, and guess what? Some of their vendors aren't able to keep up, and we got in new business. So your data has a story to tell if you know where to look, is I guess the message that I'd like everybody to be left with today. So with that, I left some time for question and answer. This is a little bit about me. I've been doing this, well, I should update it, 36 years now. But I've been very blessed to work with some amazing companies that spent a lot of time and money training me. Timken actually sent me to Harvard to learn how to train adults. And then again, I have a lot of technical resources that I can help people with. But again, I'm here to serve you today. So are there any things that are really like top of mind that you're struggling with that I could help you with?
Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, Mark, here are a couple questions. So, I mean, I've been listening to what you've been saying here. If for our group, if they had to measure one thing for the next 60 days for a sales team, what would it be? What would you recommend?
Activity with current customers. I want you to double and triple down with your current customers, particularly those that are your most profitable, because the game right now is retention, not acquisition. I would want to see behaviors in the CRM where they're reaching out to current customers, trying to expand share of wallet, giving them powerful insights, but it's going to require data. What we need to be able to do is don't count on your salespeople to be librarians and look for the data themselves. So what I call it is prescriptive analytics. So let's say they're selling a food processing plant, and this, the data should show them what other food processing plants purchase, so they can go in and have really meaningful business conversations. Hey, I noticed another plant just like yours is buying this, this, and this, and you're not. What can we do to help you? And sometimes they just didn't know you had it. So yeah, current business right now, because of the return on investment, the cost of sale, but also you just want to retain those key accounts.
If you have any questions, please raise your hand. This is a small enough group, but we can all speak live. If you're on the phone, you can press star 2, and we can call on you as well. But I'm going to call on Greg Jones. You've said quite a few comments in the questions in the chat feature. Can you add anything with regard to sales challenges?
No, I mean, I thought Mark hit it on the nail on the head when people don't want to be sold. That's been the case for I think quite some time. But we got to do a better job of uncovering their pain by asking the unopened questions. Have that dialogue. I thought I did have a question, and Roger is asking it as well. Mark, where would you have some recommendations for some good virtual sales training tools or technologies?
Well, we're actually working on that with Taryn right now, where I have some courses that I do on virtual training. I see everybody raced, to meet this need. There's some new books out on it. If you Google virtual training, you'll find some content. But yeah, Taryn and I are actually working on some new courses. I think they're going to hit like maybe in the fall to improve virtual skills. after the virtual selling webinar, some of your members actually reached out to me, and I did, individualized trainings. So, whatever you need, just let me know and I'll point you in the right direction.
Thank you.
It was interesting. I just wanted to make a note in the training, and this came up in the call on Wednesday. You mentioned you train your sales managers first, and I'm kind of curious if you have any data on, our CEOs relying too heavily on their sales managers and not understanding their own data first, and then training the sales managers to then train the salespeople.
Yeah, when I do an evaluation of a sales team, I don't just look at outside sales, inside sales. Sometimes we include customer service, but we're looking at sales managers, VPs of sales, all the way up through the whole organization, because each one has its own unique kind of assessment. And consistently, we find sales managers believe they are coaching, but when we ask their people, they're not coaching. What they're doing is they're managing a pipeline. And there's a pretty big difference. And again, we shouldn't be frustrated, because just like salespeople haven't been trained, most sales managers were top performing salespeople, and they were promoted into managers' roles, but never really trained on the skills for a manager. Coaching is a critical skill. It's one of the things that's scalable, because where sales managers make a mistake is, well, yeah, they're the best salesperson maybe on the team. Well, then they just take over the deal. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen. Well, what happens there is you just send a message to the salesperson that you don't believe in them. And more important, who do you think the customer is going to call in the future, right?
Right.
It's not scalable. You don't have enough hours in the day to do that. Trust me, I tried, right? But just imagine if all you did was improve the skill level of each of your people by coaching. So a coaching conversation is, last week we agreed you were going to reach out and talk to 10 of your existing accounts, each day. And I noticed you only did 5. What's holding you back? And they're going to say something. And then what do you think you could do to help us hit the goal that we really need to do? That's a lot different conversation than what I grew up with, which is, it was more like a military. Hey, I told you to do this. I'm not going to tell you again. That approach particularly doesn't work with millennials, just in the for what it's worth column. So again, coaching is just absolutely critical, because what you're doing is you're actually training them. They have to think. They might not even give you the right answer. And you tell you what, I want you to go talk to Barb. Barb is hitting her numbers every day. Find out how she's doing it and come back to me tomorrow. If you're always just the answer person, they're never going to learn and they're never going to own it. So coaching skills is absolutely critical. And I think Taryn and I are talking about that as well for your sales manager training. Yeah.
We have a question from the group. Can we get more detail on the Net Promoter Score, how it's measured and how to improve?
Yeah, I can get you information on that. It's a pretty fascinating analysis. And what I'll do is I'll send it to Taryn, and then you could share it with people.
Okay. Steve, do you have any questions?
Hey, on the cost of sale, you mentioned, talk a little bit more about the cost of sale. What's included in that again? I know you.
Yeah, like for example, I think it's easy to give you an example. One of my distributors in the fluid power industry, we did an analysis of net profit by customer, and one of the things that was really disturbing is one of their top 10 customers had the least profit, net profit. And so we started digging in, and we looked at different things like, obviously there's rep commissions, which, it is what it is. Freight terms, like how many days dating. But the one that we didn't expect was, I think it was 1,400 transactions, shipments in 1 year. Well, I think there's only 250 shipping days, right? So what's going on? So we went out, because every transaction was costing that distributor $110 is what they figured in printing the invoice, picking the order, packaging the order, shipping the order. Well, here, what this customer was doing was actually having them stage their shipments. So what they were doing was they were giving them orders for their orders. So when that pallet came into their building, they just shipped it right back out. So what we did was we went to that buyer and said, hey, two options. One, is there any way we can consolidate orders and actually have you, pick and ship parts like most people like you? Or two, we're going to have to raise your prices about 37%. And very quickly, they changed their business model and they started ordering like they did with other vendors. And the only reason they were doing so many transactions is that's the way they always done it with this company. So it just brings to light costs that maybe were critical 10 years ago, but you're doing them today and people really aren't valuing them, or they're taking advantage of you.
We have a question here. This might have to be some homework. I know you have them in the top of your head, but what are the top 10 open-ended questions?
Wow. Well, that depends on the industry, because when you ask an open-ended question, you also need to show confidence in your space. An open-ended question would be, I see that we've been working together, for 6 years, and I'm just curious, what new challenges have you faced since COVID? In other words, they can't answer it with a yes or a no. And then when he or she says, well, actually, the biggest challenge I have is I don't have the ability to walk around the plant and make sure that the data I'm seeing makes sense. So I might be ordering based on bad data. And then I might say, well, would it be important to you? What could I do to help you? Oh, well, maybe you could show me what my purchases have been for the last 6 months, maybe the last 6 weeks, and kind of coach me if you see something that doesn't look right. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be. The more technical and more you demonstrate competence in your space by the nature of your question, the better. So, and what I always do is my coaching, and I have a class on how to do open-ended questions. So Taryn and I, we could work on that for the team. You start very broad, and then you get very specific. The other thing about open-ended questions is there's something called the iceberg principle. It's not the part of the iceberg that you see that sinks your ship. It's what's under the surface. Usually it's 70 to 80% of the iceberg is underwater. The reason why I like analogies is 70 to 80% of why people buy is under the water. You need to ask. All the other salespeople don't ask, and they're seeing what you see. But if you can learn to ask really good questions, like in one of the webinars we did, I had a picture of a little boy, and he had his hand up, and he just kept saying, why? We need you to put it on this size skid. Why? Well, because the rafters in our building are based on that size, and your current skids aren't fitting. Oh, didn't know. One of my customers one time told me this, and again, OSHA would have a field day with them. Hey, we don't like you stacking your skids so high. Why? Well, we don't have a tow motor anymore, so we're having 4 guys pick up the skids and move them. And your skids are just too heavy, and we're worried it's going to hurt somebody. Well, I just got an insight that a lot of people didn't have. So again, open-ended questions are where people kind of share. One of my favorite ones, particularly with an account I'm really trying to grow, is if you were the president of our company, what would you do to sell you? And they usually spill their guts. Oh, well, the way you guys ship is kind of goofy. And, oh, I wish you guys did this. And just take really good notes. And you'll be blown away. They'll basically give you a business plan to grow your business.
Steve, you get any questions on your end?
Yeah, Mark, from your experience over the last 90 days, what would you say is the biggest mistake CEOs or sales managers should avoid?
Let me try to think here. Don't assume. The assumption was, well, we're just going to send our salespeople home. They're going to keep doing what they've always done. No, what we need to really do is communicate. We need to over communicate like never before. And people are going to feel a little bit uncomfortable with it at first. But the teams that are communicating and inspiring their teams and coaching them and helping them get through this and believing in them are going to come out of this a lot stronger. The people who are not communicating right now, that only accelerates and agitates the fear and anxiety that people have. The salespeople I'm talking to, they're worried about, will they lose their job? They're worried about, will my company go under? Will I get a cut in pay? Hey, I heard the company down the street did a furlough. Are we going to do a furlough? Over communicate. That's one of the biggest mistakes. And then if you've done a pivot, make sure that you share the expectation and give them the tools and the training to do the pivot. Hey, I want you to do virtual sales. Okay. Or, hey, I want you to do virtual sales. What I want you to do is ask about the person first, then the product. What I want you to do is let me give you a qualifying document to ask really good open-ended questions. Let me give you buyer persona specific questions. Really, equip them to be successful in whatever role you're asking them to do.
Mark, I've been on quite a few calls with you on virtual selling, and I've really enjoyed the discussions about the trends that you see when you're doing sales effectiveness assessments. And just a note that Mark does offer this as a service, but are there any overall trends that you can share without violating NDAs with your clients? Kind of let people know what kind of things you found out about salespeople in general.
Well, like we shared Wednesday, Warren Buffett had a great quote that, and I think Greg Tucker kind of came really close to it, which is, Warren Buffett said, we can tell who was swimming naked when the tide goes out. And, substitute the word naked for sales effectiveness. We can tell who has sales skills when the tide goes out. We can also tell who doesn't, right? So again, what we're finding is as we're doing more and more sales assessments, it's kind of disturbing how many people can't answer the question, why buy from your company? That's the value proposition. And they really don't understand their buyers and the business of their buyers well enough to be able to answer that question. A disturbing number that we're seeing is only 41% of salespeople are comfortable selling virtually without training. What else? 46% of the people in sales never meant to be in sales, but the other number is about 30% of the people on your team right now probably shouldn't be in a quota-carrying sales role. They probably should be on your team, maybe as a technical expert, maybe as an application engineer, maybe is customer service, inside sales, but not in a quota-carrying role.
So Mark, there's been a few kind of chat comments in the Zoom group chat. I want you to talk a little bit to this. A question was posted, if as an open-ended question, what is our competition or other suppliers doing that you feel we could do to improve our service levels? And there was a response made, never mention the competition. So what do you feel about mentioning the competition or comparing yourself to the competition?
Well, buyers expect you to talk bad about the competition. So in one of my courses, one of the questions I ask is, what are our competitors doing really well? And again, you need to actively listen, because did they mention everything that you do well? Because if they said something, but you're doing something else that's not on the list, then I would ask the question, wow, that's pretty impressive. How important is it for you to have just-in-time inventory within 24 hours? Oh, well, that is pretty important to me. So again, just really listen. I never talk ill of the competitor. I think it's bad. I think it just sends the wrong message. It actually reinforces what some people believe about salespeople. But again, I don't have a problem asking what do they do really well. I also ask, what's the perfect vendor for you? That one gives me stuff that might not have even been on a list anywhere. Why did you choose to buy from them instead of me? And the disturbing one there, and the reason why you don't want a sales guy doing the questions is, I didn't know you had it. That comes up a lot.
So we've gone off, and we can stay and answer some more questions. But before we go, one last question. You talked a little bit about your approach, and you work with people with sales assessments and customer assessments. Can you explain what makes your approach different in that I know you use 3 different data sets based on, and you use that data to help the teams make plans to grow. Can you kind of just talk about that? What are the data sets and why do you use them?
Well, what you're asking really is, what is my unique value proposition? And for as long as I've been in sales, CEOs who usually grew up in operations or finance have been frustrated. Why can't sales operate like my plan? Why is sales such a dark art and not more of a science? So what I'm trying to do is give them what they've always wanted: unfiltered data. And again, I've yet to meet a team that survived as a business without really good people. Usually they're making decisions based on gut intuition and what sales was like when they carried a bag. Well, you know what? That might have been 20 years ago. So if we give them new insights, I promise you they're going to make good decisions. The only time my process didn't work was with one company, when I presented the facts to the CEO and the CEO said, I don't believe it. And when I work with companies, I give you the transcriptions of the interviews with your customers. I don't believe it. Well, but he was so much confirmation bias. What he wanted to look for was things that he believed to be true in their statements. And so many of it was just not true anymore. It was true when he was in sales, but he has since been removed. He got busy. He's doing stuff like benefits now and lines of credit with banks. And he's not has that customer facing pulse that he once had. So you can't really trust that gut intuition anymore. So my advice, particularly in the disruption that we have today, is figure out your current state with data. Tell me where you want to go, and let's create a path to get you there.
Thank you. Steve, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, first, just to say thank you, Mark, for a great call. Thank you, Taryn, for hosting it. I think we all picked up some great guidelines and pointers from you, Mark. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
In 2 weeks, since the beginning of the COVID, right after the start of the COVID crisis, we received calls from members wanting to know if AICC had any templates or guidelines for creating business interruption agreements. In other words, we're asking our members, what's your plan if your plant cannot operate because you have X number of people who've tested positive, et cetera. So we began thinking, this would certainly be a good service that the association could offer. So we asked David Goach to draw up some guidelines for us. And our next call in 2 weeks will feature David talking about these. And also we will have at that time available some documents that members can use to help create these guidelines to satisfy customers, but also, to prepare for that in, unforeseen event. It doesn't have to be a COVID pandemic. It could be just a fire in your plant that shuts you down for a week or two. So in 2 weeks, on Friday, the 24th of July at 2 o'clock, David Goach, AICC's General Counsel, will be on the line to talk about these. So I invite you all back at that time.
Thank you. And Mark, thank you so much for doing this. And as always, Mark always invites everyone to follow him on LinkedIn. And it's a great opportunity to get some much more valuable resources and information. And Mark and I and Ed Wallace will be back with some courses in the fall, so watch for them. And we look forward to having you all participate.
All right, well, thanks everybody. My final comment is, make decisions with data, not emotion.
Great.
Thanks,
Mark. Thanks, Taryn.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.